Routing these channels is going to be very similar to the way that we talked about trimming the back and the top off to be flush with the sides. We want to go from these high points, downhill, high point, downhill. Same with the upper bout. We want to start high and go downhill so as not to chip it out and knock it out. And on this machine, I don't want to bring it over the top of the guitar while it's spinning. So I turn it off, bring it over, and then wait to set it down. Now we are going to route the full depth of the binding. So I'm going to need to change out the bearing as well as adjust the height. Now when I do this cut, I'm going to do this binding cut in two stages. One is I am going to take the full depth of the binding from the top, and I'm going to do that all the way around just like I did with this. And then I am going to switch the height. I'm going to adjust the height so it cuts a little bit deeper to accommodate the purfling. Now, the reason I do this in two steps, this first one is so that I can cut through this end wedge. So I can make a clean cut all the way through the end wedge for the full depth of the binding. And then when I come back around for that stepped down version to accommodate the height of the purfling, I'm going to stop short here. That way I can miter this purfling end on my end wedge into it. So it's a little bit more complicated. If you did not have purfling on the end wedge, you can go all the way across. You can bind and purfling straight across the end wedge. You certainly don't need to miter that in. I miter the ends of mine to try and tie them in together as cleanly as possible here, but certainly you can go straight across and just make it easier and less headache for yourself. That's not a problem. It really just depends on the aesthetic that you're looking for. All right, made that bearing swap, adjusted the height, and we'll do a test cut. And I'm going to do the cut, the test cut on the same channel that I did before for the for this one, the one test cut that was successful. All right, that feels really close to flush. So it's the right bearing, but I do need to drop that height a little bit to get this a little closer to the top. Okay, good. I think that looks pretty good. That is really where I want it. Maybe a little bit to scrape down at the top, which is a good place to be. And flush on the side. That'll allow for a little bit of room for the glue. I think we're set. So I'm going to route that channel. Okay, now that is done all the way across the end wedge. Now what I'm going to do is drop the height down and just enough to accommodate a purfling strip. I'm going to come down and I'm going to stop short of this purfling so that I can miter those in. I don't want to cut that all the way across and have to do a butt joint because that's the way I want to do it. But again, if that's the way that you want to do it, you certainly can put a purfling strip straight across and just have a joint like this. I made a height adjustment for that purfling. Now I'm going to test it. That is exactly right. All right, cool. First try. Must be doing something right today. Now I'm going to cut that. And again, remember that if you want to miter these, make sure that you stop short here. Don't cut into that purfling. We can come close to it and finish out the rest with a chisel. It's not a huge deal. It's very easy to just zip right through it and completely forget about it once you get in the mode of taking a high-speed spinning sharp blade to the guitar that we've put so much work into so far, and you get nervous and just blow right past it. So be conscious of that. Let's go for it. You don't need to see me make my way around the entire guitar again, so I'll skip to the parts where I get close to the end wedge and purfling so that you can see how slowly and carefully I sneak my way up to them. So here's what the end wedge looks like as I've crept up to it, not going all the way through on that bottom purfling strip. So that's the way I'm going to leave it until we install these, and then we'll clean up these miters and get this ready to go. But first, we're going to flip the guitar over and work on the back as soon as I clean up all this dust. Now before I move this over onto its front so I can get access to the back and start working on the channels on the back, I do go through and any of these loose little pieces that are kind of fuzzing off, I sand all these off carefully. I don't want to round over anything. I do want this edge to be nice and crisp. So I'm cleaning up all my fuzzies, just trying to make this as clean as possible so I have a little less work to do later. And you don't need to watch me do all this. So suffice to say, get all the channels cleaned up, all the step channels, get everything ready to go so that when we come back to it, there's a lot less work, less sanding. Always do what we can as soon as we can. It's kind of that clean up as you go philosophy. Now we can turn this over. When we get to the back, it does get a little bit interesting because our angles are going to change quite a bit. So remember, we have this radius to deal with. It's a lot more extreme on the back than it is on the front, right? So the heights might be a little bit different to accommodate the parallel that we want. So right now, with the back, because there is this large discrepancy between the depth, we are going to try and ride this balance of getting the binding in, vertical versus toed in, toed out, and getting the correct height in there. You can see here on the end, we're not really square between the side of the guitar and the bench top. What that's going to do is it's going to cause a little bit of toe in, and it's going to be a bit of an issue. I mean, this is a pretty big gap here. So I need to try and raise this up a little bit. Well, let's see. Well, that's way closer. But now I'm much higher on this side. So I'm going to take a look and see over here how that looks. Well, that side's almost perfectly perpendicular to the bench top. This side's not too far off. I'm just double checking this to make sure that my parallelogram isn't touching the top anywhere. That's going to be throwing the measurements off. That looks good. Now I'm going to double check side to side. So we're at 8 1/4. 8 1/4, side to side. And this side to side we are at 7 1/2. 7 1/2. All right, we look good. I'm gonna make sure everything's nice and snug. Okay. Now on the back, I am not going to do a stepped in. I'm not going to do a purfling on the interior of the back. That I'm just going to leave black ebony binding that kind of butts right up against the rosewood. I'm not going to do purfling on the inside of the back. But I am going to still come around to the end wedge. When I get up to that end wedge, again, I am going to stop short. And all of my settings are exactly the same as the top on this final pass where I had to stop short. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to come over and stop short on the end wedge, and then go over here, come around, stop short of the end wedge. And then I will raise the bit up and do one all the way across here. And that should get me exactly where I need to be. So I've double checked everything. Everything looks good so far. I am going to go ahead and route this channel in. Woo! All right. Now I am going to adjust the height. I'll change that, raise this up. Okay, get my mask off. Talk like a real person again. That rosewood smells great. Now again, I'm just gonna clean these edges off, get some of these fuzzies off. There aren't nearly as many as there are with the spruce though, so that'll be quite a bit easier. So essentially all the binding channels are all done, and I'm going to get all this stuff cleaned up, flip it back over, and then we will start on the actual binding process. I hope things are going well for you so far through this process. Like and subscribe to get notified of the new videos, and questions and comments are always appreciated. Let's get to the next video and start installing our bindings. See you then.